Welcome to LeaderIQ, where we share the stories of leaders in brand and retail so you can learn what led them to find success in their careers while giving you an intimate look at how they made foundational decisions along the way. This show is hosted by Guru Hariharan, who is the founder and CEO of CommerceIQ. Guru has spent most of his career working as a leader at companies like Amazon and eBay before becoming an entrepreneur himself. This podcast is brought to you by CommerceIQ, a company which Guru started in 2019 that has become the e-commerce operating system for brands like Logitech, Johnson & Johnson, Kellogg's, Mars, Duracell, and many more. If you're interested in learning more, check out commerceiq.ai. With that, let's get to the show. Today's guest is Claudine Patel, Chief Marketing Officer at Post Consumer Brands. Claudine has had such an incredible career starting in Coca-Cola in Singapore back in 2000, and since then she's just been on a meteoric rise, helping work on some of the most iconic brands across Kraft Foods, Mead Johnson, the Kellogg Company, Reckitt Benckiser, where she was the GM and CMO of North America Health, and now as the CMO of Post Consumer Brands. Here is your host, Guru Hariharan, and Claudine Patel.
Let's just start with the early life. Would love to understand where you grew up. What was it growing up like, and the lessons that you picked up early on?
Yeah, so I grew up in Singapore, I would say, I spent so I grew up in Singapore, and then my parents actually, for a time, felt like they needed to, give me exposure beyond Singapore, it being a small city and everything else. They sent me over to Australia to study, and that's when, it's just learning new cultures, meeting new people. The one thing people don't know about me is I'm a huge introvert. So when the ability to, one, go overseas, being on your own and having to actually make an effort to go out and meet new people, I think helped a lot in, I guess, building my bravery for just, having conversations with strangers, right? So I think so that was really my childhood, and it was really unconventional from a career perspective, because when I went back to Singapore, I actually started my career in media planning, and I was also a part-time DJ. I was doing all kinds of stuff, but pretty much. So I would say the one key lesson there was I was experimenting a whole lot, in my childhood, which allowed for me to think different, be different, and even explore different things, because I was so curious about new cultures, new people, right? New ways of doing things that really cultivated, I guess, my spirit that guided me from a career to where I am today, I guess.
When you think about introvert, you don't think CMO, marketer, you don't think that is a super polar apart, but that and stuff is super fascinating. What was can you unpack the DJ element of things? What got you into that? And
yeah, I actually met a lot of people through, my college days, just because the community that I was hanging out with, the folks that I was hanging out with, actually a lot of them outside of, the natural B school students, a lot of them were artists, people that were after unconventional experiences. So, I met folks in the DJ industry. I tried that for a while. I was actually DJing for a radio station in Singapore back in the day. I got into theater, so I was also, working in the theater industry for a little bit in Singapore after I graduated. And naturally, a lot of kind of the arts element of what I was exposed to got me interested in the media landscape, right, at an early age, and how creativity you could operate within creativity, but within the business environment, I guess. So that was when I actually found my way, through meeting people in the media industry. I found my way to advertising. And that was when I started my career in advertising. So it was all through people meeting people, talking to people, getting to figure out what I wanted. Because I'm not sure if everybody does, but I didn't know what I wanted to do after I graduated from school. So this was a great way in to be able to explore what eventually I knew I had a strong connection with.
It's funny when you look back at your career, you start to connect the dots. You talk about arts and creativity, and now as a CMO of Post, you're like, yeah, you know what, those make sense and could have.
Yeah. You know, the one thing I'm always telling my team is you don't realize it, but marketing at the end of the day, it's in service of the business, right? Whether you drive engagement with consumers, whether you think about really breakthrough creatives, right, that get shopper or consumer's attention, at the end of the day, it's in service of something bigger, which is how do you grow your business. So if you have that in mind, creativity becomes a very powerful tool, right, for growth in a way. So yeah.
That's great. And in school, you also involved a lot in athletics, looks like swimming and track and field. What was that like?
Hard. Yeah, you know, I was pretty much busy every day. I was part of the swim team back in school. I loved track and field. So for me, running became a passion of mine. And I have to tell you, like, I think between sports, between my love for just music, I started to realize that when you're really passionate about something, you want to excel, around it. So everything I did, if I didn't like something, I walked away from it really quickly. So I kind of knew, but yeah, sports was the thing for me as well. I love swimming. I love synchronized swimming. I was part of the synchronized swimming team. And I hope that my kids actually, hopefully they'll fall in love with sports as well. So let's see.
Looks like test and learn has been sort of a very key core component of your early life.
Test, learning, and failing, yes. I failed at multiple things. I think I tried my hands in multiple other sports where I failed miserably. I tried my hands on rugby when I was in Australia.
Oh, wow.
Didn't work well for me. So I'm going to stick to what
I could imagine. Yes, it was not a great idea. Looks like. But how was it like? As you think about having grown up in Singapore, and I don't know how your parents were, but I certainly had a kind of a tiger mom. We tiger parents who really wanted me to excel in everything, and number two was not acceptable. You always had to be number. Like, how do you can you juxtapose that with how you're bringing up your kids? Are there any differences? Are there any commonalities?
Well, a lot actually. So, whenever I talk to a lot of my friends, right, I feel like Asian parents typically are very performance driven, right? And good is never good enough. I have no idea why, and maybe because my parents were hippies, they were never like that. So I didn't relate to my friends because my parents just, and that's part of, I guess, why I just experimented with multiple things. So they never told me not to go do something, not to chase after something. In fact, they were and they were so busy with work, sometimes they were even hardly at home. So I pretty much did my own thing, figured my own way around, without much help, I would say. So I think I probably was brought up in the unconventional Asian route, where my parents just said, just don't get into too much trouble and you're fine, is really the mantra for me. So that's what I did, just so long as I didn't get into too much trouble. Having said that, I actually think there's aspects of that where I'm bringing into, raising my kids as well. Because I'm kind of a go with the flow, roll with the punches type of person, where I try not to take things too seriously, because I do believe, right, while it's important to get an education, I want to make sure my kids have that as a safety net. While it's important to absolutely be good people and be authentic to who they are, I also, and treat people with respect and treat people well. I think that authenticity piece is really key. So I do appreciate what I've had the ability to do and what I've had the ability to experience and learn. And I want to be able to make sure while I provide my kids with a good framework or a sandbox that they need to play in to be successful, to have the foundations to be successful in life, I also want them to live a little, and learn through their failures. I was joking with my boss because I say every time they argue, I would say, girls, please walk to the corner, discuss, decide, and come back. And they're 5, just to be clear, come back with a solution. But outside of that, don't bother me,
That's really well said, Claudine. I actually resonated with what you said a lot, which is I feel this is kind of a very powerful life lesson, if you may, like just one kind of quote unquote case study where you grew up with parents who didn't really push you in certain direction, did not have that attitude of good is not good enough, and that really allowed you to test a bunch of things, find out what was authentic and really the right magnet for you that you're getting pulled towards, and now you're really excelling in that, and looks like you're enjoying your work life. Like it's great to hear that story. And as many of us are young parents trying to figure out how much to push and not, and especially folks like me who've grown up in, as you said, a very non-forgiving Asian environment. It's a great life lesson. So thanks for sharing.
Yeah, because how old are your kids? Around the same age?
I just have one child who's 11 years old, and oftentimes it's quite like how much to push him, how much to let him have fun. But these sort of lessons or life lessons really help me sort of be a better parent.
Absolutely. And we all learn through the process, there's never one tried and true way. It's whatever, you feel most comfortable with. At the end of the day, I feel like so long as you provide the right foundations, that's probably the most important thing.
And going further along, Claudine, Singapore is known for great education and also great work life. And how did you decide to end up go to Australia for college?
My parents. So that they dictated. I actually, so when I was, funny story, true story, when I was 16 and after high school, I wasn't really sure, I was like every teenager, I was like, oh, maybe I want to start a business. Maybe I want to do something different, and I started a business, actually. I ran a radio production house. We did jingles. So for Denny's, it was kind of for Denny's. We worked with the Christian music industry to do a sponsored radio show with, at the time, it was called Garden Hotel in Singapore. And I did that for a few months. After I graduated from high school, I'm like, I'm going to take a break. And then, it became pretty lucrative. So, I started going out. I learned to pitch, business for business, new business and stuff like that. That's when the Denny's account came to me. I don't know if you know of the glasses brand Paris Mickey as well, but they eventually became one of my clients too. And then at some point, my parents just said, "Okay, this is ridiculous. This is not what this is not what you should be doing at 16. You need to go to school." So that was when they shipped me off to Australia. Saying that they liked the idea that I was super curious about things, and they wanted to send me up to a new environment where I can continue to grow and embrace that curiosity. But net they that's the lesson that I learned, which is at the end of the day, no matter what you want to do, just make sure you have that safety net of education, and then whatever else you want to do and whatever dreams you want to chase after, you can do that after.
That's incredible that you were able to do something like that at 16.
Yeah,
creating something and then actually getting some early lessons on how to sell, whether it's selling an idea, selling your time, like it's a skill. Looks like you picked that up pretty early on.
And it's also advertising, because at the end of the day, we produce jingles that was aired on radio for our clients. So
that's incredible. That's great. So how then how did you end up at as one of your early jobs?
So after I graduated, actually I like to keep myself busy. That's one thing I realized from a young age. I hate to not do anything. So every school holiday, whenever I travel back to Singapore, I would look for something to do part-time. So I would either waitress, or I would go, and that was when I met people in the theater, and I joined this theater company, and I was with their kind of marketing and sales team, just because I've had that experience with my own company called OWA, the production studio. So it was then that I met some folks from the advertising industry, and they were like, oh, you seem to have a knack for this. Why don't you come and work for us? They were folks based out of UM. So when I graduated, actually the day I landed back on the shores of Singapore was when I started with UM. So I had an opportunity before I graduated where it was nice coming back to a job immediately after graduation.
Got it. And how did you decide to sort of shift to the client side, like to work at Coca-Cola after that?
Yeah, I was working in advertising for a few years, and I think the one thing that I had a lot of exposure to was Coke was actually one of our clients. So that was when I actually discovered the pivot, right? So while I really loved the creativity and how we built the strategic foundations for where the brands can go, how the brand should communicate, you don't own the business, So I think if you are a person that loved creativity, loved the variety, I think it's such a great opportunity to be in the advertising world. I was curious about building the depth of the business management piece. So, and that was when I started to learn that while I love creativity and marketing, I love the idea that you impact the business in a powerful and meaningful way. And that's why, when I started, when I was pitching to the Coca-Cola client on a specific project, they pulled me aside actually, and they're like, hey, are you interested in coming to work for us? So McCann actually seconded me to Coke for a while, and then after that they hired me on board full time. But that was when I realized I love being on the client side because I get to work with the best of the best in the creative advertising industry, but I had the opportunity to create the impact by leading and driving a lot of the decisions on the brands.
And also seeing through it, right? I think we also have a bunch of consultants at Commerce IQ, and one thing that took me for a year or two is how much satisfaction it gives them to that you're not leaving just a bunch of decks on a table and walking away, but actually seeing through that strategy, living through it, and falling flat on the face, and then waking up and getting up and really fighting through it and really seeing that entire thing through. That I'd imagine that would have actually given a lot of satisfaction.
Absolutely. So I think that was when I realized that I really loved and thrived being on the client side. Yeah.
And then you went to Kraft. So what did the Kraft team see in terms of you jumped from being in an APAC role to an innovation team out of New York? Can you unfold that story a bit on what gave the Kraft team the confidence to give you that jump?
Yeah, I was in Coca-Cola, I want to say, for about 6 over years. One of the best, kind of foundational learning from a marketing career you could have had, because I think even as I look back at my career, Coke was so advanced in the way, it moved the needle on not just marketing, but even business management, business analytics, leveraging real-time feedback on the digital front and stuff like that. I realized we were doing that like way back when, when Google and everything else was just, I guess, in the forefront. But then I think I was in a Southeast Asia role in Coke, and the opportunity came back for me to move to an APAC role within Kraft. So, I was like, okay, broader opportunities. At that time, India and China were key markets that were continuing to grow, right, rapidly. And I figure I wanted to move into and learn about more new markets that were potentially opening up and on fire. So I was with Kraft Asia Pacific actually for about two over years. Loved my experience there, working on some cool brands, Toblerone, Oreo, Crystal Light, not here, but I think over in Asia. And at that time we had a strong growth agenda, and that time was a time where China was just opening up, India was just opening up. So your growth footprint doubled, tripled, quadrupled within a year, 2 years. New distribution points opened up. And then that's why there was a lot of success over in Asia. So, we, at least for my team, we more than doubled the business in a year and a half. And that was when, US said, hey, potentially it was interesting. They actually reached out and said, could we potentially learn from what you guys are doing out there in Asia in terms of how to drive growth? Because in the US developed markets, right, growth was pretty much flat. So they reached out for an opportunity for me to move over to the US, see what principles I could bring into the organization over in the New Jersey office. And I was like, why not? Right? Packed my bags and off I went. So it's more their curiosity for what we were doing in Asia that led me to the US. And I think their confidence was in proven results of what we've accomplished, that they wanted to kind of take some of the learning experiences from us.
It's kind of forward thinking. It's very interesting that Kraft realized that it was there were a lot of learnings out of developing markets that could actually be brought into a developed country like the US.
It's super interesting because I think the leaders, at least that I worked with at that time, and the senior execs, what I loved about them was the minds, and then just opened up my thinking that, you know, the opportunity, the openness for disruption, the openness to learn from each other, the sheer humility of leadership was what I actually embraced with my Kraft experience. In fact, a lot of my people that I worked for way back when I came over to the US at Kraft are still my mentors today, because I mean, naturally, all of them are super intelligent, and so successful, but yet so humble in how they are hungry to always be better. And I think that's where, you know, you see leadership not as just a way to dictate, but a way to naturally help teach, but also absorb, you know, from people that you're working with.
Yeah. And you looks like you also had some lifelong relationships that you built over there. And what is your take on mentors, and what's been the role of mentors in your career?
You know, I believe mentors are important because, one, I feel like there's just a lot of continuous learning. The mentors that I actually still have, you know, I still keep in touch with, are people that I've learned a lot when I was working for them. But even now, because they're always in the spirit of learning, I'm always learning from them. So one, because they have way more experience than I have, you know, every conversation I have, I leave with learning something new. And also when I struggle, you know, within what I do, right? People I lead or teams I lead, I also ask them for coaching advice so that I can, you know, and then pressure test how I'm thinking about things. So I think they're very good sounding boards for me. Helps keep me in check. And also, you know, like I said, I think there's a lot of learning as well. And the thing is, their networks are so wide, all of us combined together, you know, we kind of feed off each other's networks too, which then outside of mentorship, you get a lot of just new thinking from people that you meet, you know, within their circle.
It really resonates with me, Claudine. I think the space that we live in, especially this decade, there's so much changing in CPG. Yes. It's just unbelievable. And it's more of the norm to see something that has not been done before than what has been done before. So it almost feels like this is the decade where, you know, as they say, we're going from kind of not just looking at IQ and EQ, but you also are having to think about the LQ, which is a learning quotient of a person or a team. Can they pick up new things? Do they have the muscle to learn new ways of doing and new ways of operating and stuff like that? Looks like that's kind of core in you, and I can see how you'd have a good followership in your team because of that.
Yeah, that's actually really true. I mean, you know, the one, I was just talking to someone the other day, and I was like, comfort is your enemy, right? And, you know, while, you know, I've been in the industry for a while now, so I'm not, you know, I'm not a youngling anymore. But having said that, that's why, you know, I don't want to be comfortable, because you can get obsolete really quickly, and you're not able to, you know, like continue to make sure you grow and evolve, you know, as a person, as a manager, and as a leader of you know, of an organization. So having that, I think I love what you said about LQ. I mean, making sure you're always tapping into the LQ piece is equally as important as well.
Claudine, jumping a few years ahead, you now became the CMO of Reckitt. What do you think that that you did in the first 9 months as a VP of marketing? It's like you got promoted super quickly there. Can you share some of your experiences and learnings from there?
Yeah, I always believe that you have to make an impact pretty early on every time you join an organization, you know. After I want to say a month or even less, I don't like to use the newbie card anymore because, you know, it's not I don't think it's relevant anymore. So I would say that the few things I spent the first 30 days really observing, you know. So one, we had to embrace, I think I kind of worked with the team to embrace the culture of agility, progress over perfection. So one, I think I wanted to make sure that because in healthcare especially, it's a lot more difficult, but working with the team to embed that into our culture, which helped us actually move things a lot faster. I was, you know, so for instance, a TikTok campaign, instead of waiting for weeks, 5 days, you know, the agency would come back with something and then, you know, we move fast, you know. So one, and I give credit to the team because, I mean, their ability to pivot and, you know, embrace that culture and move, you know, as a team so that was one. Second of all, I had, you know, the one other thing I did was breaking down silos, which enabled, you know, for work to be not only faster but better because people were actually talking to each other, and you know, and building plans that were in synchronicity, right? Because at the end of the day, plans are just paper on a page. The execution needs to be tight and it needs to be right. And to do that, you need an army to move at the same pace and move towards the same vision.
I think there's a lot to unpack over there, Claudine. This was great. So, by the way, I love your lesson on don't use a newbie card after a month. I so resonate with you on that. It's if somebody comes in and says month 2, saying I'm drinking from a fire hose, that it just makes me cringe, right? At this time you should be up to speed. So that's a really good lesson over there. At least if you want, don't say it to your boss.
Yeah, exactly. Tell it to your husband or your wife at home, you know.
And you also talked about this TikTok campaigns and things like that would move fast in 5 days and stuff. How did that happen? Was that a culture at Reckitt all the time, or is that something that you intentfully put a culture in place at Reckitt?
No, I think one you lead by example. Second of all, you can't do it alone. So if any manager thinks that they can, you know, shape, you know, a team by themselves, it's absolutely false. So I hired people and or made sure my, you know, direct reports embraced that mindset and amplified that mindset and continue to kind of roll it out across the teams, right? Because like I said, you know, I think the thing is you need an army of people to rally behind you. Because I can tell you, and I tell people this all the time, I'm definitely not the smartest in the room. And, you know, but what I love is to be able to unlock the barriers for my team to do, you know, to move with speed, to absolutely be brilliant. And if there's anything that gets in their way, I think it's my role to make sure that, you know, I kind of break the barriers for that to happen.
That's great. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that's it.
No, got it. Yeah, so I think that actually brings me to the other point that you made as well, which is breaking down silos. I love that concept. I think it's oftentimes when you're sort of 5 different teams working independently, moving really fast, you can very quickly sort of lose a rhythm, and suddenly each one of us may be playing a great instrument, but the orchestra is not in harmony and you just sound terrible. And how do you sort of keep that in? And one of the things which, in fact, when I look back at my days in Amazon, one of the things Amazon just nailed it very early on was this entire thing on bringing together all the data silos, where for them, every single team was what they called a 2-pizza team, which is a team not big enough that cannot be fed by more.
Yes.
You would have heard about it. But so what it meant was that each
I
team
love that, by the way. I love that idea, because anything that by consensus, just sometimes you don't end up doing.
Yeah. And they used to do that so well in that giving them the full independence and making really good metrics out of it. Each team, each two pizza team had a quote unquote fitness function, which would tell you, are you doing well or not? And the number usually starts with somewhere less than 0.25, and it goes to 1, and you know that the team is doing really well. And in fact, Jeff Bezos at some point, like when I was there, was personally noticing and measuring all the fitness functions of all the two pizza teams across the company. But one thing that they did really well was, while you're giving this independence, how do you make sure that the entire company is moving together forward and not getting in each other's way? And they actually created this core thing around there was a very simple mechanism where you would pump all your data into a common data warehouse. So that way, if I'm in inventory planning and I need to know what the forecasting or the supply chain or the purchase order team was doing, I could just pull data from the data warehouse, and I knew, and I could code accordingly. So I didn't need to go and meet somebody and all that, because that can just slow down. So the reason I bring it up is I fundamentally believe in this breaking down silos concept.
Yeah.
But what I would love to hear from you is, are there any mechanisms that you've put in place that you saw that worked, much like the data warehouse example that I gave from Amazon?
I like that data warehouse idea. I mean, I may, kind of pick your brain after that to kind of figure out how you do it, because data can be so inundating. How do you simplify the way people are able to access data, right? I think that's interesting. But I would say, a few things. One is just outside of the basic process. One of the things that I try to do is just regular cadences of meeting with the core team, just to make sure whatever information is filtered gets filtered down across, right? Also, the other piece that I try to do is I also involve our agency partners, because we forget that a lot of what we do, especially in the CPG world, we're not doing it alone, right? We have agency partners, strategic partners that help move the needle for us along the way. And sometimes we forget that they exist just because they don't exist in the same building. So, I think for me, it's probably, we don't have data warehouses. I think we have tools where we enable people to go in. But once again, sometimes technology doesn't allow you to talk, and the talking elements of making sure we have very useful, tight core team meetings with our agency partners is important, because then everyone knows what's happening across the business.
That's great. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. So now again, I'll keep moving on the career. Yeah. You've sort of made your way back into going back to your roots in food as a CMO.
Food, yes.
So what are you excited about today in your role?
Everything. I mean, I can't say enough, but like one, I love being here. For a few things. One, Post as a company has such a challenger mindset, right? Which is everything that from a values perspective, that I believe in: curiosity, disruption in a deliberate way. So the challenger mindset is super important, because if you're an industry like powerhouse, right, and you tend to have to live within the paradigms because you shape the category. I think whereas a challenger mindset and have it comes across as you're able to disrupt paradigms. So I love that already, because I think Post were at the forefront of driving that disruption. Second of all is driving disruption, you need the ability to be able to do so, right? And I'm excited here because I feel like the culture is such that it allows you to do that. We sometimes we are our own enemies. We as people tend to overthink things, overanalyze things, and that's what's keeping us from moving fast. But Post as a company and the leadership team I mean, we've had conversations where they were like, make us feel uncomfortable, you know, help us see what possibilities are like. And that spirit is, you know, fits with my professional values and who I am as a person. So I think the match is perfect. And naturally the brands as well are super exciting. I mean, Pebbles, Honey Bunches of Oats, it's cereal brands that I grew up with and love and my kids love now. So working on those brands are, you know, are so fun.
It's okay to hear that. I think it's I think I sort of related back to your very early days where you sort of figured out that being authentic really makes you successful. And here you are really enjoying your work where this is innovative. You're also talking about the vulnerability and humility elements, which really attract you. That's core to the culture, and really you're enjoying your work as a leader here. So, and I'm sure that's sort of translating eventually into team happiness and results and all that stuff. So it's really nice to see that connection.
The only thing I don't know is the weather, because everybody's been telling me how cold it's going to get in Minneapolis, and I'm like, I haven't experienced that yet. So let's see. I may run far away after I experience my first winter in Minneapolis. So.
Maybe that'll be a time for you to do an offsite in the Bay Area and bring your team out here.
Actually, I want to. Yes.
I'm also curious, like when you look back at your career and zoom out, is there a particular failure or a tough situation in your career when you look back that really ended up with a solid lesson? Like, you know, for me, for instance, when I was going through this company building, I thought building a great product, having a great team we could conquer anything. We did that, but I missed the fact that betting on the right market was so important. So I bet on the wrong market, and I really figured that even an A+ product and an A+ team in a C market or F market is a recipe for disaster, and we failed miserably. And now that has been a huge learning for me to say, okay, well, it does matter what the first two things are, but it also matters a lot in which market you're betting on. So yeah. I'm curious, curious to know about any learnings that you've gone through.
Yeah, there's two. One definitely skewed towards work and one more on a personal level, professionally. But I would say the one lesson I had early on in my career, and that actually taught me that, you know what, it's okay to make mistakes. And I had a strong, you know, at the time, my manager was super supportive of creating that spirit. So in Coke, you know, I want to do this flashy outdoor billboard that was outside a mall, and I was like, this is going to generate so many eyeballs. I want to be there. And I did so he was like, are you sure? Because I'm not sure about this billboard. It seems really expensive, you know? And I was like, yeah. And then I sat in front of the cafe that faced the billboard. I'm watching people, I'm calculating, you know, how many people actually, I did all the right research, and I did all the right, in my mind, I'm thinking this is a perfect location. So then I convinced my boss to actually, you know, allow me to do that. It was a very expensive exercise, but it didn't generate the results that it did. I mean, billboard advertising, you know, especially in the old days, sometimes if it's not at eye level, it can be really hard to capture, and it's digital. So the ads flash through really quickly, and somehow our return on investment and efficiencies were not great on the media buy. So I came into his office. I'm like, look, you're right, I'm wrong. You know, but it was really nice because he was like, look, you tried, right? And now you know, and you just don't do it again. But what lessons have you learned from that, right? One, you know, I like, you know, the way you've done your research and homework, but there are some blind spots that you missed. So, and he would do it every time, you know, we would talk about new campaigns and things like that. He would always bring that up, but he would always bring it up in a very positive way to say, look, I want to bring you guys an example of what Claudine did in the past, where it was a huge learning for all of us, you know, in terms of how can we do better and think better. But he gave me the opportunity to experiment on that, right? So I appreciated that learning, because now it was so early on in my career, it just helped. And from a personal perspective, I actually left the corporate world for a while to do my own consulting. It was really lucrative, you know, and naturally I had good mentors and good bosses who hired me back to do consulting work. And I thought, oh yeah, my entrepreneurial bug came back to bite me, and I was like, this is really what I want to do. But it wasn't a failure, but my learning there, it made me learn about myself, right? I like to lead teams. I like to build leaders of the future. I like building capabilities. Consultancy can be a lonely journey, especially if you're out there doing it on your own. So that lesson to me was, which makes me appreciate my corporate career even more, is the ability that I have to be able to do the things I love and to be able to create the what I enjoy most, which is teams and leaders of the future.
I love how you sort of go down a path and you take a step back once in a while to do something different to see if I'm the right path. That's pretty cool.
Ton of experimentation all the way.
Going back to that billboard example, so clearly as leaders, we start to develop bias. We have a confirmation bias and stuff. So in that case, also looks like you sort of you looked at some data, you corrected yourself, but maybe there was a confirmation bias on that. First of all, was that the case? And how do you sort of not have? How do you sort of address that in your in the decisions that you make today?
So I think data, when was I in Coke? I want to say 20 years ago or something. Data at that time was very different, right? It was very manual. You do what you can from a light research perspective. When you buy media, you have the basic Nielsen around reach, frequency, and things like that, GRPs, but there's not a lot of insight into consumer behavior and, and how you can even drive prediction and trends forecasting. I think the data today, there's a lot more rigor behind it, right? I mean, naturally there are tools around machine learning where you can learn from historical patterns and help us shape where we think we want to go and validate that. There's first party data, right, that you can really collect consumers' information. There is ways to link shopper behavior with how you buy media. There's so many new tools out there that I am still learning and going through all the possible tools that can help shape the way we learn. But I would say 20 years ago is so different from now. You almost appreciate technology for that.
That makes a ton of sense. I think using data as a way to really to either defunct or being open-minded to see if it can unseat your confirmation bias. That's
yeah.
I've also seen when some of the hacks that I end up using, that's actually been very helpful to me, is if I feel very strongly about something, I would tell my team saying, guys, I feel very strongly about this. And oftentimes I would use the word, I think we should do this, just to sort of, even though if I'm feeling strongly about it, if I'm not completely made up my mind, because that just putting I think in front of it just helps people open up a little bit, that, okay, Drew's not made up his mind. This is something for brainstorm, and just it makes it more inclusive.
Absolutely.
Helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I being here, I was just having a chat with someone that used to work with me in the past, and I was like, I really miss you, because this girl, she has so much fire and passion. I would be telling her, I'm not sure if this is the right approach, but she would just continue to beat down my door and try to convince me multiple ways and bring data, and her passion around what she believes in is truly amazing, right? And somehow I think, I like the way you say I think, because nobody is 100% right, but I feel like if someone can have bring a compelling case for how we should be, what are the alternative ways to think about things, is what we all as managers, love. And that's why I go back to what I'm a big champion of, is diversity of thinking and diversity of independent thinking. I think that's super important, because then you can have really healthy conversations and respectful ones, whether or not you agree or disagree.
Love that. Yeah. And as we start to wind up here, would love to understand or would love to get any advice that you have for any aspiring C-suite executives who are right now trying to stand out in their organizations. Anything that you would recommend them to think about in sort of putting their career on a fast lane?
Outside of just trying everything? No, I would say one is this, right? I mean, while it sounds like I have had, multiple experiences in life, I have, but I try to do so in a deliberate way, right? So for example, when I was when I took a step back, right, to in my career to explore consulting, I was even exploring fashion design for a little bit because I love shopping, but I realized loving shopping doesn't mean starting a fashion business is a good thing, separate altogether. But I think my advice is one, but be deliberate, right? If at least have an end in mind, and like any experiments, you can pivot along the way, but always know where you're headed towards. So for instance, when I was out, exploring fashion and everything else, I always kept a pulse on the CPG world, right? Either through my consulting projects and things like that, but I never fully left it. So I always had a safety net when I came back. I made calculated risk, and I would advise people to do so. Calculated risk is super important if you want to experiment with things and having an end in mind. And then the last thing, which I think it's so important, is really develop independent thinking, right? And be brave about what you think could possibly be the right approaches. Because if I go back to what you said around, someone in a senior position coming to say that, I think there's an opportunity to have that respectful, helpful debate. So, but independent thinking is important as well. And then the last one is, I would say, just always stay curious. That's the one thing that we need to all do in order to keep kind of refreshing and sharpening our skills, so that we continue to stay relevant in an environment that's always changing.
I love those life lessons. Keep experimenting, take calculated risks, have the end in mind, and learn and be curious. That's great.
Yeah.
Awesome. And finally, as the world is starting to open up now, is there anything that's on your personal to-do list or bucket list, as they say, that you're looking forward to?
International travel. I haven't traveled internationally for so long. I mean, domestic travel, yes. Road trips, yes. But I haven't been back to Singapore in goodness knows how long. I'm sure it's changed rapidly, So I would love the opportunity to just take a plane that's anything more than 10 hours again. So
I love that. Share that common ground with you. Awesome.
Right?
Claudia, thanks for coming to our podcast. It was just fantastic to have you. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Cool. Well, this was great, Claudine. I really had a lot of fun. Thanks for sharing the story. It was fun.
Sure.
There's so much behind in your story. It was really cool.
Yeah. Hey, so this data warehouse thing is so interesting.
Yeah.
Did you have like data visualization
Yeah.
tools? I mean, because data can be so hard for people to tease out, no?
Yeah. No, I think that's a core of, in fact, frankly, what we do as well. Because we think, I mean, if you think about data aggregation, the challenge with data, bringing all data together, is that, well, that itself can be a very daunting task because there's so much data. Then where do you end? I think starting point is fine because here are all the data points, but where do you end? Which is, some people might say, okay, then is it daily synchronization? Is it hourly synchronization? Some of them, we are doing hourly decisions, then we need to do hourly, and things can get broken. At what level do we have, and all that stuff. So what we have found to be very effective is actually, as you said, starting with the end in mind. What is the decision you're looking to make, and at what frequency? And then go back and say, what data do we need to collect and put them together? Which is, for instance, if you're trying to do retail aware advertising. Advertising bids are happening, every hour. In which case you need to bring your supply chain data or digital shelf data alongside with advertising data every hour. But on the other hand, let's say promotions, you're making a decision once a week. And then supply chain data coming up with promotions elasticity, that could be data that could come together in a week. It doesn't need to be an hourly level granularity. So really starting with the end in mind, what is the decision / automation that you're looking to make? And then backing into what data we require and what frequency.
And the people that pull the data, they're very they're used to that. The user face or whatever is friendly enough for anybody to pull the data, or you need to have like really experienced, seasoned people to go into this data warehouse to be able to.
No, people shouldn't be pulling data at all.
Okay.
Data aggregation, data pull, and data synchronization is a machine problem. This has been solved for 10 years now already. So every company, every advanced company is doing it automatically. So for instance, let's say Let's take, for instance, Amazon. If you're trying to manage Amazon, or if you're trying to manage Walmart.com, you've got Retail Link, you've got Walmart Connect, you've got DSM, like the shelf measures, and you've got your backend ERP, or maybe let's say you have your content store. Those data can actually come together on a daily basis. You just need to put the right things in place in that. And so it's pretty. This data aggregation problem is a solved one. I think that ship has sailed. You'll get really good solutions, and if you're trying to solve that, I don't think your team is addressing the right problem. The right problems right now are: what decisions can I automate? How much can I go hands off the wheel? How do I put the right strategy and guardrails in place so that I can automate more and more? How do I get my institutional knowledge into the machine so that when people leave, like, e-commerce is so ephemeral in terms of people just leave all that. So like, how do I not? If I'm a leader, how do I make sure that if my marketing person just takes off, that I'm not behind by 4 months, right? Those are the type of challenges which are worth solving these days.
Okay, it's good to know. Yeah, we're so, Post is it's a little bit of a dinosaur. We're trying to look at automating a lot of things on a lot of fronts. So, I'm just trying to figure out what's the best way of doing all of that outside of even e-com, like just.
Okay. Yeah, I think there's a ton. I think this is a decade of automation. I mean, starting from your car, Tesla, right? But that's we can certainly, I'm happy to get back. I don't know where I'll check back with the team. At least in the e-commerce realm, area.
I know they're talking. They actually they were really impressed with the tool. So I know they're talking and they're following up on conversations.
Okay, cool.
And then the one thing I was going to follow up with you on as well is if it's something that you can help with, I'd love to schedule that for the team to come out and figure out a way to get inspired, right, by things that are happening in the Valley. I think in the tech world, I think it could be super interesting for some of the folks, especially as we take on, agility from a mindset and muscle perspective that we're building. And then on top of that, how we think about innovation and even testing and learning along the way, like this idea of building MVPs for us is still so preliminary. MVP in food, of course, naturally, but there's a ton of opportunity to do better.
That sounds great. Actually, let me noodle on that a little bit and my team members get back with some ideas.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, cool.
Awesome. Cool. All right, thanks, Guru.
Yeah, see you, Claudine. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
If you enjoyed listening to this episode, it would mean so much to us if you could take a moment to share this show on LinkedIn. To learn more how Guru and his team can help optimize and grow your e-commerce business on Amazon and other retailers, visit commerceiq.ai. Thanks for listening.